Hey guys, what's going on? What's up, folks? Welcome back to Make the Jump here from the BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network. That's right. You just recently heard me spewing a bunch of different things happening on the last episode, but guess what? This episode is at a whole freaking new level here. Sitting across from me, he needs no introduction. It's the man from Home One Hangout and my good friend, Mr. Mike Moriarty. Mike, what is up this evening, my friend?
Oh man, you know what? I've been looking forward to this ever since you asked me to come on, and ever since I got to meet you.
Oh yeah.
Just over a week ago.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be on here. I love guesting, but I definitely love guesting with friends of mine. So this is going to be good.
Oh man, yeah, let's. I don't know if the good people know. Of course, they've seen it on Instagram. They've seen it on Facebook. The picture of you and I over at B Wings at Brewskins, the event that Rebel Cause put on. But man, it was so funny when you walked in the door and you showed up with your Vader jersey #1, and I was like, wait a second, who's the only other podcaster that has the guts #1? Because a lot of people are kind of weird about the Star Wars jerseys thing. And I was like, nah. Mike would totally rock a Vader jersey, man. And people don't know that first. It was such a great honor to meet you in person, and especially B Wings at Brewskins too, dude. Wasn't that such a good time?
It was. I mean, #1, the fact that we were able to put on, or I mean, all you guys were able to put on such a great shindig to support an awesome cause. That takes the cake. That's #1 right there. But the frosting on the cake to be able to meet so many awesome people, hang out with so many awesome fans. I mean, it was a 2-for-1 deal that you just could not beat.
I like that little 2-for-1 deal. It's not even a Toys R Us 90% off sale. It's 2-for-1. Yeah, it was just so much fun. I mean, Rogue Squad Pod was there, which I thought was awesome. Mopar himself, finally getting to meet him in person. And then you had the guys from the Sci-Fi Geeks crew, which was really good. I mean, it was just such a great bevy of characters. You could, including Starbecue over there. Talk about a bevy of characters. Frode knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Oh, he'd agree.
He would totally agree, and Mr. Bede there as well. But Mike, listen. All right, Home One Hangout. Give me the rundown. How did Home One Hangout start, man? Because you've heard us talk about Brick City and how we started off, but I have a funny feeling Home One Hangout's got their own little shindig and their own little thing going on there in terms of its origin story.
Well, it was funny because I think it was not long after The Force Awakens had come out, and I was like, I want to do something to kind of get involved with the fan community, and I didn't really know what. I'm not really a creative. Like I've dabbled in writing. I have zero artistic skill, so it's like I don't know what I could possibly do. And I was listening to a lot of Star Wars podcasts, and I was like, I could do that maybe. Yeah. And so I got with my buddy Matt, who I've collaborated on with tons of stuff in the past, but we've always it's always fallen to the wayside. And I was like, dude, I want to do a podcast. Would you mind helping me out? And I don't think he knew that he was literally getting roped in to do the whole thing with me. So
right.
I volunteered. I drafted him without him knowing.
There you go.
Yeah. And luckily, we stuck it out. We started in, I think, July of 2016, and been going ever since. And I've been winging it the whole way. I don't have any audio recording training. I don't have any tech training. But luckily, podcasting is relatively easy to do as long as you have something to talk about and good people to talk about it with. You can make good, entertaining stuff, and so many people out there have been able to do it, especially in regards with Star Wars. And so I'm glad I started it, and it's been so much fun because I've got to meet so many awesome people. I mean, forget even making a show. I've gotten more out of this than I've been able to give to anybody, period.
That is such a good freaking way of putting it. I mean, it's so funny that after Force Awakens, we all started to say, well, maybe I should start doing a podcast. For Brick City, of course, it was February. For you guys, it was July. Rebel Chatter, Rebel Cause did it in February as well, literally a day after we started the podcast.
Oh, wow.
Rebel Cause fired up. And it's so funny. I keep reflecting on it, and I've never had the chance to have a conversation with somebody who started around the same time as us, other than, of course, Rebel Cause. But, Mike, there is something special about those months and even weeks following The Force Awakens that truly motivated us. Did you feel that vibe too?
I did too. And I think, maybe when you get down to it, maybe it had something to do with, this was Force Awakens was the very first Star Wars film not made by George Lucas. It was made by fans. It was supported by fans.
True.
And that might have stirred something in the creative spirit of other fans to be like, well, look, fans really are involved in the making of Star Wars. Maybe I can make something too. And maybe that had something to do with it.
That's a really good point. I mean, I'd be curious if anybody out there who's listening to this episode to make the jump. I mean, hit Mike and I up, please. Like, when you started a podcast, I would love to see. Actually, you know what, Mike? I'm going to do this. And let's retweet this out. All the podcasters out there, give us your origin dates of like when you started your podcast. And
that's cool.
Let's do a timeline and just see, because it would just be great to see the stats, I feel, for when these podcasts started firing up. Of course, there's some out there that have been doing it 15 plus years. You know who you are. We looked at you when we were getting started and we were like, yo, maybe I can be like you someday. But please, I mean, I think we got to do it, because I think that especially for the people who listen to us, the Home One Hangout listeners, the Brick City listeners, origin stories are so important to that. And much like origin stories with Star Wars, Mike, obviously we're coming out of The Last Jedi here. And we're getting super excited because now that Solo's out of the way, and it's crazy to think within like, a few months we got Last Jedi and then Solo, a Star Wars story. I mean, that boggles my mind still. But now we're heading towards episode 9. More recently, we got a little bit of a tidbit that was kind of dropped out of nowhere. Hollywood Reporter and a lot of other people reporting that Mr. Billy D, the D himself, Colt 45, is going to be returning to the Star Wars universe, according to these reports. Are you excited, Mike? Because I've heard a lot of different people out there saying, you know what, it's cool that he's coming back, but I just, we're not sure whether it's going to add what we need to it or if it's going to extract. It's kind of a middle game right now on this headline. You hear me? Think I lost your audio there, buddy.
You got me back?
Yeah, there we go.
All right. I get mic problems every once in a while.
That's all right. Did you get the question there?
Yeah, I got the question.
Oh, nice.
When I first heard it, I think the first thing that went through my head was, well, he should have been in The Last Jedi, but that's okay. Right. But man, I don't want to say maybe, I'd be afraid that some people might think that they're trying to put a Band-Aid on the passing of Carrie Fisher. Like, we already killed off Han Solo, and now, I mean, I'm going to assume they have a plan or they're working on a plan for the character of Leia. But, I'm afraid some people will automatically go to the negative as like, well, they're just trying to bring back another classic character to try and fill in. And I don't honestly think that's the case, but I'm excited. I love Billy D. Williams. I got to see him in his Smooth Talking stage appearance down in a Celebration Orlando, and the guy is just cool. I mean, I can't wait. If he is confirmed to be coming back for episode 9, I cannot wait to see Billy D's representation of Lando back on the big screen again.
We're coming right off of Solo, where we saw Lando himself as Donald Glover, and now we're getting Billy D. Williams in episode 9, if all the reports are true. And what's exciting about that, Mike, which has got me super pumped too, and you bring it up right there, is that, yeah, you know what, there is that, of course, we're going to all walk into the theater and say, Carrie Fisher passing away, what are they going to do with this film? That's still the underlying question. But I still have a funny feeling that we might still see a Han Solo tribute to his death somewhere in here, and that's where Billy D. Williams shows up. It's either there, or we see him take in the form of when Leia sends out that call on Crate out, and messages were received, but Billy D. Williams was just not there on time. Lando Calrissian himself just couldn't answer the call at the time. What do you feel makes the most sense for Billy D in this film? What do you think the role of Lando makes sense with Episode 9? Because we got J.J. Abrams behind it, so he's going to craft it in a way that makes sense to fans.
I think, I mean, when you look, I mean, at the end of The Last Jedi, the Resistance is literally like a dozen people in the back of the Falcon. So, I mean, they can't go any lower without getting wiped out. So they need help. And the fact that nobody picked up the phone when they were calling means they need whatever help they can get, they have to get. And I think Lando is going to be their last chance. He's going to be the only person that can help. And, like you said, it's possible that maybe he just didn't hear the call. Maybe he wasn't there. Maybe he couldn't get through. Because Lando, at the end of the day, is not someone that's going to let his friends down. And you don't just fly into a Death Star for nobody. So
that's a really good point.
And the thing is, there's so much emotion and so much storytelling they can bring to by bringing Lando back. My dream scenario would be, he finds out Han is gone and he just throws himself into the Resistance because my friend is gone. Maybe if I had gotten involved earlier, maybe if I had taken Leia seriously and not done my own thing, maybe I could have saved my buddy. So there's a lot of potential there for bringing him back.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much development in terms of, and it's funny to say that because we think we've seen enough development with Lando. We think we've seen enough with Solo, a Star Wars story, and then of course what we saw in the original trilogy. But in my mind, Mike, I feel like there is still more to his story, much like there is with Leia, but much like there was with Luke in The Last Jedi. I mean, listen, and obviously J.J. Abrams was behind The Last Jedi. He was an executive producer on it. So he's been able to work these characters throughout this trilogy, no matter what space he's been in. Yeah. And to see what he did with Luke Skywalker, of course, working alongside Rian Johnson, and to see that progression as a character, almost the vulnerability, it would be kind of cool to see a vulnerable Lando, somebody who's been kind of obviously after Endor, somebody who had to go back out and kind of be a smuggler again, had to be, go back into his role, and to see that vulnerability of that character, much like Han was at the same time, having to go back to his old life. And again, Mike, you said it perfectly. Him throwing himself back into the fight in honor of Han, because that's what Han would have done and what Han did do in the original trilogy and also in The Force Awakens. He threw himself back into the equation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It's so funny that we're having this conversation coming off of a Star Wars film. Because, Mike, I don't know how you feel, but Episode 9 for me, I recently said on the last episode of Make the Jump that I love all the Resistance stuff, and I love everything that it's going to develop. And the Billy D. Williams coming back to the Star Wars universe as Lando is fantastic. But I really want some Force lore with Rey, even with Leia, and the development of Ben Solo, Kylo Ren himself, because now that Snoke is gone, he's going to really tap into something much darker, I feel. What are your thoughts going into Episode 9 when it comes to the Force itself?
Well, I mean, with The Last Jedi, a lot of people trash the prequels for the throwaway line about midichlorians, and they're like, that ruins the mystery of the Force, which I honestly don't think it does. But you get to The Last Jedi, whatever you think about it, whether you think it was great, whether you think it was okay or not, there was a lot of just Force lore, mysterious kind of stuff in there. Like, you didn't know that two people could connect across a galaxy like that. And now that Snoke is gone, they still have that connection too. Snoke isn't even holding it together now, and the two of them still had it at the very end of the film. So, if anything, I think the Force is probably still awakening. You have these two gigantic Force users that are diametrically opposed to each other, just as Snoke said. The darkness rises and the light to meet it, and those two stars are still shining and growing. I think the Force is only going to get deeper. You see Force ghosts manipulating the physical world. You just see a ton of Force stuff going on, and I mean, what else could they possibly think up? I mean,
Mm.
Look at the Clone Wars. Look at the Rebels. Look at how deep they go into the Force, and they haven't hit the bottom yet. So, man, I mean, it's hard to speculate, but I think we're going to see some very interesting things when it comes to Rey and Kylo in Episode 9 and their abilities, and even how the Force possibly manifests itself.
Wow. I mean, the manifestation of the Force is something that, I mean, it kind of, I guess Dave Filoni kind of touched upon it in the Clone Wars series a little bit when we see the arc of Yoda going and, of course, running into Darth Bane and getting to know really the true nature of where the Force came from.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff, number one, if I ever find out that J.J. Abrams crafted Episode 9 and Dave Filoni shows up on the screen, I'm going to freak out. It's going to make sense because what you're talking about is very similar to what Dave Filoni has done across his career, even with George and what we've been seeing with Rebels and maybe what we see continuing to Resistance as well. But that's a conversation for a whole other time. But Episode 9, and something I continue to reflect upon, it's fantastic that The Last Jedi is on Netflix, number one, because you can go back and you can pause things and look at them now and really look at, different aspects of what Luke was speaking about. And inside the cave on Ahch-To, not the one that Rey eventually goes to try to find answers, but within the meditation chamber, we have that pool there, and we have the light and the dark, and the yin and the yang is how I look at it. And to be bluntly just straightforward about this, when Rey looks at that, I think back directly to, I'm wondering if that's the first moment that she felt that connection that Snoke had bridged the minds between her and Kylo. That dark and light coming together, that yin and the yang. And I always go back to that. I'm thinking about like the dojo mindset, but how with the light there is the dark, and there has to be both in existence for there to be balance. And it's so funny, but Luke Skywalker kind of touches upon it in The Last Jedi, where he says to say that the Force is just something that the Jedi holds is vanity. He learned that straight from watching Palpatine and Vader almost destroy him.
Yeah.
That there is this power, and that through the Force, somebody who is bad can be good, and somebody who is good can become bad.
Yeah.
And it's so funny, but heading into Episode 9, I want to see that connection between Rey and Kylo. I want to see Rey kind of touch upon the dark side and really kind of turn herself and then come back, and then Ben Solo as well. I guess we've kind of seen that, Mike, a little bit when he tried to, first of all, take out Leia in The Last Jedi. He kind of touched upon the light and then returned back to the dark, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, I mean, right there was echoes of, I'll say old school Vader from like the Legends material, that there was always that spark of Anakin that Vader could not extinguish. And there's kind of that same, I mean, he is Vader's grandson, and as dark as he is trying to be, there's some spark in there that he can't get rid of. And that's why he couldn't bring himself to kill his mother. So there's that, like right there, he's just imbalanced. He's in the dark side. So I mean, just the concept of him from Force Awakens saying, I feel the pull to the light, like it's a bad thing. You're hearing a Jedi in reverse, literally. Whereas a Jedi would say, I feel the dark side, I feel it tempting me. It's an absolute reversal, which I think is brilliant, a very unique way of going about a dark sider and a bad guy that's in process. And I would really like to see that struggle between the two of them, and it'd be interesting to have them, that light and the dark there, because they kind of did it with the same thing with Luke and Vader. When you see them in the throne room, Luke is getting tempted by the dark side, and the light side is calling to Vader at the same time.
Yeah, and that's in its most simplest aspect, the power of the Force in that moment, and it totally confused Palpatine in Return of the Jedi. He never expected Vader to pick him up and throw him over the edge. Much like Snoke did not expect Kylo to turn the saber on him to, relinquish him. And that is, I keep going back to it. That's what makes The Last Jedi such a great film for Star Wars fans. As much as the negativity in the community will say one thing, it really does touch upon so many different aspects. And to be honest with you, does it set up episode 9? It doesn't really have to. It just gives us what we needed with Luke Skywalker. That was the big thing for me. Was Luke Skywalker a big thing for you with episode 8, The Last Jedi itself? Like, I can imagine. I think we all kind of geeked out, but I'm sure you geeked out too.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's like a lot of people. It's really weird to see a character who would be, a childhood hero, and when you show up, they're not the same person at all. In fact, they've completely turned their back on who they are. It's interesting because one of my favorite Luke moments actually is in Battlefront 2.
Oh.
And it's when he goes to the cave on Pelio with the Emperor's Vault, and he's there with one of the Inferno members, and he saves his life. And the Imperial says, "Well, why did you do that?" And Luke says, "Because you asked." And it's such a great Luke moment post Endor where he gets it. But then you fast forward, 30 odd years, and that's not him anymore. So I think that was really bold, but then they brought him back to where he was. When he's figuratively facing down Kylo on Crate, he's where he was in the throne room. He gets it. He's just got a little bit more sass, which makes it fun. He's almost got a little bit of Obi-Wan sass going on. So it's like a red off. It just took a couple decades. And, but man, I know people complained about Luke in this movie and stuff, and don't get me wrong, I have plenty of complaints about The Last Jedi. None of it that's ruining it for me. And at the end of the film, you do get Luke back, and it's such a beautiful thing when he comes right back to where he was, and you're like, there's Luke, and he saves the day. You get your hero back, and I mean, I don't think that's the last we're going to see of Luke. I'm just going to say that. I don't think that's the end of Luke.
That was actually going to be my next question to you. Well placed. Well freaking placed, Mike. No, I mean, I totally agree with you. I was talking with Jim Roberge here at the network, and he's a huge Luke fan, number one, Jim. I'm shouting you out. He's such a huge Luke fan, and he was fascinated by the progression of Luke in The Last Jedi, and I still even go back to the scene on Ahch-To when Yoda appears and he says, "How I've missed you so," to Luke. And of course, he burns down the Force tree, which is absolutely fantastic. And Luke is so worried about the Jedi texts, and he's so worried about the books. And Yoda says the line specifically, "There's nothing in those books that Rey hasn't already learned," which I think caught Luke off guard because he kind of got an idea when they first entered the tree, and he said, Rey from nowhere. Yeah, you're from nowhere, actually. He was starting to get a sense of who she truly is. And those Jedi texts, man, I know they appeared in the latest Star Wars comic again with a Porg in it, which totally made it worthwhile. Pick up at the comic book store. But what fascinates me about those Jedi texts, because the comic book shows Rey kind of going through them, it's kind of like what Luke went through after Empire Strikes Back is what Rey is going through at the end of The Last Jedi. That same experience of I tried to turn my enemy, I tried to get in, face them for once, and it didn't come out the way that I wanted to. Yeah. And now that she has access to these texts, but Yoda says that she doesn't need them, but I feel like Rey is going to really dig into these deep, Mike. And are we going to see a similar progression, do you feel, with Rey going into episode 9 that we saw with Luke going into Return of the Jedi? Because I would nerd out completely if she showed up with black robes on and pulled it off and tried to convince a smuggler to release her friends.
Well, the thing is, I think everything that Luke was accusing of the Jedi of old was technically true, but he took it too far. He took it to the Jedi need to end, which is not the case. Because I'll go back to one of my all-time favorite characters, Qui-Gon Jinn. I truly believe he was
Qui-Gon.
exactly what the Jedi were supposed to be.
Yeah.
He understood the doctrine of the Jedi, but didn't become a legalist slave to it
Right.
like the other Jedi had. We did a whole episode on Qui-Gon Jinn. I'm convinced that if he had lived, Anakin never would have fallen to the dark side.
It's a really good point.
But I think at the end of The Last Jedi, Luke comes back from that. He comes back from that edge of the Jedi need to end. So he still has that knowledge of the Jedi's mistakes in the past, and he knows how not to do them.
Right.
So he doesn't have to end the Jedi. And I think Rey is already in that state of mind of where the Jedi should be and what they should do. And she doesn't know the past mistakes that they've made, but I don't think that's in her head. I don't think she could go where those Jedi are. Now, I mean, granted, you could make the argument that over the next, 1,000 generations, they could end up in the same place they did in the Clone Wars.
Right.
But I think the Jedi are gonna, if they're coming back, they're gonna be right where they should be, where Luke was going to be leading them before his order was destroyed by his horrible mistake. Man, I'm excited to see it. Forgive me because I know you don't like that era, a new Jedi Order.
No, it's true.
I'm really excited to see a new Jedi Order because we didn't get to see it, and I mean they might put it in upcoming comics and books and stuff what Luke was trying to build because they're still keeping really tight on that period of time. But to see it reborn and be the way it should be, I'm excited. I'm really excited.
A lot of the stuff when we first, obviously with the rebuilding of the Jedi after, we saw a lot of the conflicts early on between the Jedi and the Sith Wars. And we saw kind of the old Republic type stuff move into the New Age. We see Yoda come into the picture as a Jedi Master. We see that refoundation of the Jedi in Coruscant, the Jedi Temple. A lot of that stuff started refocusing itself, and then it fell apart. And to be honest with you, and like you said, to be honest to a lot of the fans, we never saw that redevelopment. It was always stagnant. There was never really a rise. We saw little bits and pieces where we saw Kanan Jarrus, we saw Quinlan Vos, we saw obviously Rey, and we saw Luke Skywalker, and to a certain extent Leia. The progression of what she held in herself that was the Force. And you're right. And I know a lot of people are going to say it. I wasn't a big fan of it until you just mentioned it because it makes sense now. It makes sense coming out of The Last Jedi that Luke says the Jedi are going to end. Rey says, And I would love to see Rey carry on that Qui-Gon Jinn mindset. Qui-Gon, and I mean, I'm going to have to go back and listen to that episode, by the way. We're going to share out that link, by the way, about the Qui-Gon Jinn stuff, because that is important heading into the near future here with Star Wars. And his whole concept was, it's not about the brute power. It's about what you do with the Force and how you're able to adapt yourself to your surroundings. And he was able to do that even more than Yoda was. And he was able to transcend himself into the Force so that he could still speak with people. That is something Yoda knew existed, but he could never do it himself until Qui-Gon Jinn was able to truly explore that pathway. So that truly tells you what the power of the Force is. And if Rey can tap into that, maybe the Jedi texts are going to hold some. I mean, number one, if she opens up the book in episode 9 and it talks about the transition into the Force, and suddenly Qui-Gon Jinn's writing is in there, like there's a journal from Qui-Gon, oh my God. You fan service, but it makes sense. It would make complete sense that amongst the ancient Jedi texts, Qui-Gon Jinn, Luke was able to get his hands on that book and slip it right on in there, thanks to Obi-Wan along his journeys. And if we see that progression, man, I will be super, super happy, because what a place to showcase him.
Yeah.
What a place to showcase him. And whether we see that physically happen, who knows? But that's what's going on with episode 9 heading forward. Mike, one of the other things I got to talk to you about here, man, and it's just Star Wars podcaster to Star Wars podcaster. is as a Star Wars podcaster, it's been a very interesting journey. I'm kind of connecting this to our first discussion a little bit, but it's been a very interesting journey in terms of how we've been able to get our voices out there and how we've been able to spread the good word of the Star Wars universe and our passions. And it's funny. I recently was talking to somebody over at the local mall right across from me, the Fox Run Mall, which we'll be having our event on very soon, along with Starlight Children's Foundation. And I was talking to an employee over at FYE who listens to the podcast and is a subscriber. And they said to me, they said, you know, Robin, I'm really fascinated in how you were able to start a podcast. And I said, well, you know, I said, I'm not the only one out there. There's people like Home One Hangout. There's people like Making Star Wars. There's people like San Diego Sabers and Rebel Cause. There's so many different people out there that have started podcasts and have been able to work their voice into the community and have been able to be successful in doing so. And they said, well, they said, I'm not so sure that I can do it. And as a podcaster, you kind of take a step back. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, Mike. And you say, you said you can't do it. And it's like, hold on a second. Now, I want to get your thoughts on this because I was kind of meditating on it last night after this individual had spoken to me about it. But a lot of people out there think it is tough to get into the podcasting world. They feel like it's a huge investment. It's something that's going to consume a crap load of money and is something that they have to invest 24/7 into when it is completely the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's something I continue to think about ever since this person brought it up. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on that because it sounds like you started just like us. Is it really that hard? Because I don't think so in my end.
No, it's not. I've had conversations with other people that have talked about getting into podcasts, not necessarily Star Wars, but just other stuff. And it is not that hard. I mean, I've said this before, I am extremely low tech. I literally have my microphone and a computer. That is it. That is all I have. I don't have a soundboard. I don't have a studio. I don't have any of that stuff. I want that stuff. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, yes.
One day I'm going to make it. I'm going to get there.
There you go, Mike.
But you don't need it. I remember one time I was chatting with Bobby Roberts, who used to be on Full of Sith on Facebook. And, I asked him, I was like, what is your preferred tech setup? Just getting ideas and stuff like that. And he rattled off the different hardware and stuff he had. He's like, but honestly, you don't need it. He said, as long as you can just, carry a conversation and sound good, you're good. And, I took that to heart. And that is all you need. This is what you need. You just need to take the time to make the show, and you need people to talk with about stuff. That is literally it. And like I said earlier in the show, you will get more out of podcasting than you put into it, bar none. The people you will meet, the conversations you will have are going to pay back tenfold whatever you put into it. And I am a better person. I'm a better fan for getting into podcasting. It has changed who I am as a fan in Star Wars, and I've grown. It's just for the sheer therapeutic benefit. Get into podcasting.
Yes,
I'm like, for real.
So true. Doesn't mean you have to roll up the sticky green and smoke it just to make yourself feel good. Pop on a microphone and take some of that stuff in. That's the stuff you should be enjoying. You're right. It is therapeutic. It is something that every single day we kind of take a step back, especially, I work in education. I work with kids all day, and I come home and sometimes it just really knocks me out and I feel tired. But you know what? I pop in the microphone, or I pop up my phone in the audio recorder with a microphone, and I say, you know what? One of the best ways to get that stress out is to talk about what you're passionate about, and just get it out there. And one of the hardest things I think that people have a hard time comprehending is that, well, then I have to invest in an RSS feed. And we went through SoundCloud to start, and it was free. And you're able to share it out, and there's so many different free ways to get your voice out there.
Yeah.
It really is.
Our problem, we started and we're still hosted. Our feed is still hosted on Podbean, and Podbean is wicked easy. I would suggest Podbean to anyone getting started out. It helps really easy to get started. But we started on their free service as well. And then it turned out we had so much to talk about, we were outgrowing our ability to still use that.
Right.
So I have to put only a little bit of money in to be able to get more of our content out, because we grew beyond that, because we were talking about so much stuff. So yeah, and also don't be afraid thinking there's no help, because you have all these online, you got Podbean, you got SoundCloud, you have those things, but get with other podcasters. They will help you. They will give you advice. They will encourage you. I told you when I met you up in Lancaster, my number one rule about podcasting is supporting other podcasters.
Yes.
We are a family unto ourselves. We're a community. We need to stick together and help each other. And I will support and encourage any podcaster out there in what they want to try to accomplish.
Hell yeah, man. That was perfect. That was perfectly put, because it's what it is all about. It's not this, you got to listen to this one, not that one. You got to listen to this podcast because they do this different than this podcast. No, each podcast has its own style. Each podcast has its own thing that it does. And whether you feel like listening to Fulisith one day and then listening to Home One Hangout the next day, Brick City one day, and then Steel Wars the next day, and get your little bit of Australian comedy in there. That's you have the power to do that, because we're doing this for free. I think some people think like, are you getting paid for this? No. Because we're passionate about something and we want to share that with you.
Yeah.
I think there's this big misconception. I've talked to so many people. Every time I say that I run a podcast network, they come up to me, how much are you making? It's like, take the price point out of it. Take the freaking price point out, because it's not there. It doesn't exist.
I don't have a Mercedes-Benz microphone I'm talking into over here,
You don't have that C-Class one?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm doing this partly because I'm greedy, because I get a lot out of it. But, I've gotten messages and chatted with people about how much they enjoy the stuff that me and Matt and Chuckles put out.
Yeah.
And the feeling you get from that,
yes,
you can't compare that to something to anything else. When someone says, "Wow, I really enjoyed that," or that really made me think, and you stop and think, "Wow, I did that. I contributed to that." There's nothing else like it. I mean, so no, I'm a little bit greedy. I'm a little selfish in doing podcasting, because I get a lot out of it. I'm going to admit that.
Listen, nothing is more selfish than Jabba the Hutt on a sail barge trying to get a little bit of pleasure out of kicking some old Jedi down into a Sarlacc pit and then losing a bounty hunter over it too, even though he may still exist. I mean, it's a weird place, man. And I think as long as we can continue that conversation as podcasters and tell people that, you know what, we're doing this because of you. We're doing this because we want to talk to you. Like that's the biggest piece that I think has to be made clear to fandom. And obviously we've seen it across social media more recently. When podcasts come together, some pretty powerful stuff can happen.
Yeah.
We can truly make a difference in not only just somebody's life, but an entire community's dynamic. It's absolutely fascinating to watch that happen. And if we can continue to do that amongst all the things happening in this world today, I'll be happy. I'll come home. I'll pop myself open a beer. I'll go sit down and I'll pop in a microphone, man. I mean, that's one of the best things we can do continuing forward, I feel.
And the thing is that because it's so unexpected.
Yeah.
I never thought, I didn't really think through the process of, I'm going to put my voice on the internet and it literally will be available to anybody with a computer or a phone.
Yeah.
I never really thought about that. And then when you start getting that feedback and you realize you're doing something, you're contributing something, you want to do it more. And you want to contribute, whatever it gives people, you want to give more. And I think that's one of the unique things in podcasting is it keeps you coming back for that ability to be able to, in a way, even help some people. Which, of course, I mean, with like when podcasts go to the point of, you know, Rebel Cause and what they're doing, they're making a tangible difference in the world as well.
Yes.
It's a beautiful thing. Absolutely.
And you can kind of sit back and say, wow, that's exactly what should be happening right now in the podcasting community. And it's so great to watch the progression of Rebel Cause and the progression of all these podcasts. I mean, every day I'm looking on Twitter, a new podcast pops up. And it's so great to see that more and more people want to get their voice out there. And listen, a flooded feed is better than a feed with the same stuff every freaking day. And I'll take that over anything in this world. I'll take it over freaking peanut butter pie if I have to. And that's a tough pull. That's a real tough pull with a big guy like me. But Mike, listen, all right, before I conclude this show, I always ask one of the most quirky questions in the Star Wars universe to whoever we have on Make the Jump.
Right.
And this one's coming way out of left field. I don't even think that Mookie Betts could fly this one out and catch it.
Whoa. Anything.
I know, but I'm not so sure he can fly out this question and go and grab it, because that green monster might just get in the way. But let's take a look at this question right here. If you were a stormtrooper, what would your TK number be?
Oh, man. Oh.
Mookie Betts is already running.
I'm going to cross the streams. TK007.
Yo, you just made a connection between the James Bond universe and the Star Wars universe.
I'm a big
crap.
Bond fan.
So, are you really? Which Bond movie is your favorite?
Oh, man. It is a tough tie between Goldfinger and Skyfall.
Ooh, wow, two different generations.
It's man, it's tough because Skyfall, it just felt so James Bond, and there's a lot of hate for that movie, and I don't know why. It was so good. I mean, it's because Casino Royale was so good too.
Yeah,
but
that's true.
There's just something there. There's something so quintessential about Bond in both of those films, and I think Sean Connery captured it, and I think Daniel Craig does a great job of capturing it. And some reason those two movies, it's just always neck and neck with me. It depends on how I feel, because I have all of them on DVD. So it depends on what I'm feeling. I'll pop them in every once in a while. Actually, I just looked at Skyfall today. Like, man, I gotta watch that again. It's been too long.
Ooh, I like that. You're looking at you're giving the whatchamacallit eyes over to Skyfall, and you're telling it I gotta give you a try again. I like it. Now, man, listen, before I wrap this thing up, I gotta tell you, of those two, actually, it's funny. My favorite is Skyfall. I absolutely love what that film does. And being somebody who grew up on the classic James Bond, introduced to them early on, I even remember playing the James Bond video games for a Nintendo 64 growing up. You want to really talk classic.
Dude, I'm looking at my 64 right now, and GoldenEye is next to it.
Oh, my man. My man Mike with the 64 plugged in.
If we ever hook up, you and I are playing GoldenEye.
You know it, man. We're going to get the pizza rolls rolled out. We're going to get the high C fruit punch packets out, man. I am so pumped. I am on my way to Pennsylvania and down to Virginia ASAP. You know that's happening. So, yeah, I mean, it's just one of those films that I grew up, like I just said, the high C fruit punch, the pizza rolls, playing the game, watching the movies. It's just, and then, of course, we get reintroduced to the James Bond universe, too. I know it's outside of Star Wars. Oh, Robin's getting outside of Star Wars. But
it's fandom. It counts.
It's fandom. It does count. And I just love what Daniel Craig did with the James Bond story progression, and with that, I guess you could say the James Bond universe in terms of films. And oh man, it's one of those go-tos, man. If I see it that it's on television, I'm like, ooh.
The Bondathon?
Oh, the Bondathons.
I might as well just settle into that couch and not get up. You need to bring the food to me.
I'll bring the Pringles pizza flavors right on down to you. No problem whatsoever. Oh man, Mike, this has been such an awesome, awesome conversation talking about everything happening in Star Wars and also everything happening in the freaking fandom. That's so awesome. And of course, a little bit of a James Bond throw in right there. But it's not an episode of the podcast network or an episode of Make the Jump without a little thing we like to call, do you know what this is?
Yeah, I think it's oh man, what is it? Plug time.
Oh, I love what you do with that. That's just like we do it here at the network, man. Oh, my Lord. Mr. Mike Moriarty, where can the good people find you across social media?
Well, you can find me on I'm on Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at the Fanboy Awaits. You can of course find the show At Home on Hangout on Facebook and on Twitter. And of course, we're taking a break right now. We got stuff we're doing. Both me and Matt and Chuckles, we got stuff going on in our lives, so we're gonna take a break. But I've got plans. I was actually chatting with the guys today that I'm gonna let them in on some ideas and some plans I got, so we can start working on some stuff. And shout out to Matt and Chuckles, you guys out there. You're awesome. Thank you for keeping me in line and stuff when we're doing our shows and stuff. So
you always got to have those other two to keep you in line, man.
I do. It was just me talking. I wouldn't want to listen to me. I gotta have some minds to bounce some stuff off of. And I'm going to plug real quick. I'm actually wearing a sweet looking Brick City Blockade Podcast Network shirt that I happened to get from my good friend Robin.
Oh, he's even rocking it, man. Oh, he's touching all the feels tonight.
Well, hey, man, it was the impact of so many podcasters in one room. It was almost too awesome. I don't know how the building was still standing with everybody in there. It was it was just great. So meeting you, meeting Foden Bede and Steve Kirk out of nowhere.
Oh my God, that was so great.
It was great. It's podcast brother love, man. That's what it is.
Oh, it totally is, man. The brotherhood of Star Wars podcasters. It continues on much like IG-88, Boba Fett, Bosk. That group right there is the powerhouse of bounty hunters. We're the powerhouse of the podcasting brotherhood. All right, guys, you can follow me over on Twitter at Mr. Vote Tweets. Make sure to check me out over on Instagram at The Official Vote. Please make sure to follow the Brick City Blockade over on Twitter as well at Brick City SWPC. Also, make sure to check out www.brickcityblockade.com for everything happening in the friendom, bringing Unity's community to a galaxy far, far away. Please make sure to head on over to TeePublic, pick up a BrickCityBlockade.com podcast network t-shirt. Rock it like Mike is right now. Get all those feels rolling. Get yourself a copy of GoldenEye for Nintendo 64 and rock it the right way. Please also make sure to subscribe, rate, and comment on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio. Do all the good stuff happening in a galaxy not too far away. Mike, thank you so much for coming on Make the Jump, my brother. We'll be talking real soon, man.
Oh, heck yeah. When you come on the show, we're going to have a chat about the Yuuzhan Vong, just so you know.
You're going to slip that in there, God damn it. Oh, you want to talk about taking those feels and throwing it right into a Sarlacc pit? That's what Mike just did right there, man. Nah, I'm kidding with you.
Vong for life, baby.
Those Yuuzhan Vong, man. All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. And as we always say, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.
Always.